Aha! Right, it's Monday the 17th of September, and now we have the garden clear. The first film I want to make is this one, and this one is looking at the boat and understanding how she's built and what condition she is in. So let's start at the bows. Lovely summer weather. Autumn, early autumn, it's warm. Right, we can see here we have obviously the hull of the boat, and this is, well, the whole boat is moulded in glass reinforced plastic, so it's made in moulds, single-sided moulds, where the glass fibre is laid in with what is called a gel coat, and then glass fibre reinforcement with plastic resin, and the inside of the mould is just left unfinished. So we're looking at two moulds here. We're looking at the hull moulding, which is the whole boat, that's the real boat, and then on top of that moulding we have, this is the bottom of the deck moulding, and that is the whole of the top side of the boat. The top side is just capping onto the hull of the boat, so there's a joint between the hull and the deck all the way around the boat, and this is the bit where we can see it. This is the whole deck joint, and all the rest of it is capped over with this rubbing strip. Now this rubbing strip is as old as the boat but is largely intact. It is a bit separated at some points, slightly separated, at its joints. It's not fallen to bits, I think that's the joint of it. It runs all the way around the boat. It's joined here at the stern, along the top of the transom. Runs around the back of the boat. Here it's been damaged, rotten, replaced with just screws into the boat, and the original rail has been cut off here. And again on the other side, not in terribly bad condition, it's quite hard all the way along. Again, separated at the joint, not in terribly bad condition. All the way around the boat. So let's have a look underneath and start to understand what's going on with the hull. So I've got a bit of wood down here. Put a bit of light on us. There we are underneath. She's straight out of the river here, so it's all, she's covered underneath with growth from the bottom of the Thames. It's rather like you would see in the sea. Little clams, little bits of what I would say was sponge, freshwater sponge, and this brown is all that used to be green. Slime. Now while we're down here, we can start to look at what we will see from the inside. And that is the through hull fittings. So where things inside the boat, so the sink, and the little loo and the cockpit drain. We'll have a look at all those, but now we're underneath, we can have a look at where they come out underneath the boat. And here is the hole in the hull underneath the toilet, which we will have a look at. And you can see this is just cut through the fiberglass. There's no finishing piece on there, it's just literally cut through, and on the inside I can feel with my finger it's dried mud in there where she's been underwater, and this I can hook my thumb underneath there, and this above here is just a big hole, and we'll have a look at that from inside. Let's go and have a look at the decks. Actually, whilst we're on our way to the deck, let's have a look at just this condition of the waterline. The hull paint has never been too bad. It's not marine paint, and you can see all over the boat. And it's a real problem in the river, in watercourses, is pollution from plastic fragments falling off paint jobs. And you can see where this has been painted with, I would say it's been painted with house paint, is that we've got flaking paint all over the boat, flaking paint into the water and all along the water line. And you can see where the water has eroded the paint here, and the deposits of the green and what have you start below the water line. But here there's an erosion of the paint at the surface of the water. So this is paint, and this is underneath where the paint is, and it's all become very flaky. So we must, if there's paint to be going back on here, it must be proper paint so that it doesn't be flaky. 'Cause it's a real problem we certainly see here on the transom. There's this flaking of paint. So the whole purpose of refinishing the boat is actually to get a proper layer of proper paint all over the boat so that it doesn't flake off into the water anymore. Not for the sake of looking fancy, but for the sake of protecting the boat and then not polluting the watercourse. So, the deck. So above the hull is the deck moulding. And these are both moulded in open moulds. The deck is upside down, so both these mouldings we'll see on the inside of the boat that they're unfinished on the inside, but these are the gel coat inside surfaces of the open moulds. So here is Arwyn's deck. Now you see here, chipped through, so that's the actual original surface, and it's been overpainted with this, which is sanded paint, so paint with sand in it, and you'll see it's flaking again here, but in parts of this paint it's enormously thick. It's some millimeters thick under there, and it can't, I don't think, really be sanded because the paint has sand in it, so it's as hard as the sandpaper. You see here a patch where the anti-slip paint has been cracked through and has fallen off the boat. We'll see also the number of deck fittings that we have on Arwyn's decks, particularly on the port side, so that's on, as you face up the boat, your left. And the port side has been set up on this craft for mooring, and the starboard side for the ropes that operate the sails, the running rigging. So we have blocks and things and fair lead, that is. There's no cleats on this side. that this is the original running block. I'm going to be a bit loose on terminology here, official sailing terminology, because there's names for everything and I don't know them all yet, but that's runs the sheet to the jib form sail, and as well that is part of that. And we had lifelines all around the boat fixed into these stanchion points, and on each of those you can see that where they've been fixed in and force has been applied to the lifelines, that it's broken the deck largely at those points. We've got some original winches on each side, but on each side there's actually quite a depression around the base of each of the winches. I'm not entirely convinced that that isn't a mould issue, because they're the same on each side, but we shall have a look underneath to see if it's a strength issue, to see if they've actually just eroded over time. This is the ensign point, the flag where that flies. We'll come back to the rudder, but here we are up the port side, so we've got a lot more in terms of cleats that are involved in the mooring of the boat, the tying her up to the quayside, and around to the front. Then this, I'm going to call it the king post. It's probably not called the king post, but that is the strong point of the boat for mooring, and that goes right down through the boat, and we'll see that inside. So all of these deck fittings are old, loose, the bedding is gone, and this deck leaks. It leaks into the boat. So let's go inside and have a look in there. Right, well, let's have another look. Right, so now we're inside. Let's usefully look at the inside of the hull deck joint for a start. So here's the unfinished inside of the hull and the unfinished inside of the decks, and the hull deck joint here. And there are various fixings, some for the rub rail and some others, I think a little higher up, that actually fix the deck or tack the deck to the hull. And this is infilled with sealant, and we can see where there's a tape of glass fibre has been applied over the joint or at the edge of the joint. We can't quite see in, and there's no clear glass fibre tape here, but this has been glass fibre taped along here, and we can see here the underneath of the way that the deck fittings are fixed in, and that extends right around, and that is the underneath of the anchor winch, and in front of it the bottom of the king post, and here the hatch. So we've got some more mouldings in here now to look at. So as well as just the hull and the deck, we have this liner, and this liner extends right through the boat. It forms the seats, these bits of furniture, and it's fixed to the edge of the hull. This is just about at waterline level. This has been taped over with glass fibre from here to here. So this and physically thick, so I can see that. And somewhere maybe it's just a bump. So I would say this is quite an important piece of the structure of the boat, because it reinforces the waterline all around the boat. And at the thwarts, perhaps, the widest point of the boat, then there's this square bracing against the widest parts of the boat on either side, and those bracing points are used as furniture, but really they're structural. And you can see that where the inside of the hull is an unfinished glass fibre, the furniture and the deck, the hull liner, is all smooth, fair face, like the deck and the hull were outside. So on the inside of this is its unfinished side. We can see that in there. You see this is unfinished, the same as this unfinished there. One more moulding to look at. So we'll see that best one over here. So if we look down here, this is the starboard side. This is the inside of the hull. And we look at here, this is the keel, which is moulded into the hull and is filled from the inside with steel pellets. And then this is capped off with a concrete, cement layer there, and then painted over. But these parts, which then go across the top of the keels here, that is the structural grid of the boat. So this was laid in to the bottom of the mould, pre-moulded piece, but as the hull was being moulded, so then, or freshly after it was moulded, the keels were filled and then the structural grid was placed over the top to brace the boat all across the boat. And under each of these hatches down the centre of the boat, you can see that the structural grid is capped and fixed to the hull liner. So this makes it a completely, so this is a structure, it's a three-part combined structure with the hull, the structural grid and the hull liner, and these are fixed together, and this gives the boat its strength through the union of these three mouldings, and then that is capped and stopped from flexing by the hull to deck joint and then the deck over the top. Now we will notice while we're just in here is to look at this point. Now this is where the mast fixes above here into the tabernacle, and this is a structural beam that runs all the way across the boat. I've had this described to me as the saddle, and this thick structural member transfers the loads from the mast that come down into the centre of it, and they take them sideways and to the edge of the deck, and this is adjacent to the fixing point for the rigging. On the outside of here is the chain plate. So this is a very significant part of the boat structurally, is the junction between the saddle and the chain plate backer. So this makes this part of the boat very strong indeed. And that's essentially the structure of the boat. Now I want to go and talk about the cockpit. The cockpit, which, well actually, whilst we're passing, Let's have a look at this loo. I mean, I'm not a big fan of this, and no, I've not used it. It flushes directly out into the water through the hole that we saw underneath, and I'm not using it. It's disgusting, and also tiny, and also illegal mostly everywhere unless you're in the middle of the ocean where laws don't exist. So inland waters, harbours, marinas, on the rivers and the canals, one can't just flush one's waste out through the boat into the water. It's not a thing that happens anymore. So I'll have a chemical toilet. So let's make this redundant. But we can see, perhaps, then the inside of what we're looking at beneath. So the hull for the loo is directly underneath, but where I was putting my fingers around underneath the hull of the boat, and you can see where this is, the keel is coming through here, and this is like a sort of a dome over the top of the hull. I really want to, you see how it's disgusting, this is one of the first things that I need to do, is just investigate what's happening here, get rid of this, seal up the hole. And just on our way to the cockpit we can have a look at another couple of the through hull fittings, one of which is for the sink, and it's there, and the Vivacity has a particular design flaw, is if one is on the port, on the starboard tack, so if you're sailing over to one side, is in fact the sink drain is below the water level if you're really sort of leant over. Now this can fill the sink and pour and sink the boat. So I'm not terribly keen at all on any through hull fittings, and that one in particular. But also we have, underneath the cockpit, so underneath the outside here, we have the two drains in flexible pipes that come down that would drain the cockpit. And whilst I'm in this extraordinary position, we can have a look at the inside of the lockers at the back of the boat. And we can see here is that at some point Arwyn has been full of water up to this dirty line here. You can see the dirty line, and you can see the angle of it. So she's been stern deep with a lot of water in. I think it's probably because of the deck fittings being loose and it filling with rain. She's never let water in through the hull, or through any of the through hull fittings, but she has let quite a lot of water in through the deck, through those very badly fitted fittings, cleats and fairleads and things. So I'm not worried about that, but it is something, you know, she's basically as she was when I got her. So this is, you know, this is looking at the boat as if I just got her, right? So this is the stuff that I wish I'd understood when I bought her, and I'd be able to have a look. Right, so, the cockpit. Now this is a very traditional arrangement for boats, for yachts. I'll stick my neck out and say that it kind of comes from dinghy sailing. And this over here, this is the sailing position. So it's sitting sideways. No matter what heel of the boat, one can always be sat with one's feet bracing if you're on a slope, tilted over, heeled over, and with the tiller controlling the direction of the boat So one always is really sat sideways, looking up into the direction of travel, making one's neck rather uncomfortable, I've found, and not really having a terribly good view because you're sitting down. So I've always sailed Arwyn, well, I've used it on the river at least, going along, stood up on the seats, my foot on the tiller, having a jolly nice view of what's going on all around. Now, we're going to talk about seaworthiness now, and seaworthiness is the degree to which you can go to sea and not be put to the bottom of the sea by the sea. So that is to resist the boat becoming flooded by the ingress of water. I mean, it seems really obvious, so if we look at the arrangement of the cockpit in this boat, it's a deep section that one stands in. It's got a step up into the boat, and then this entrance to the companionway has sliding wooden panels, and then we have these seats to the side and these deck lockers, cockpit lockers here. But we can see into the cockpit lockers that they are not sealed particularly, and they fill with water from the rain, and they get really full if you leave her on the water for a long time, and have been, you know, as we've seen inside, she suffered from near sinking from the ingress of rainwater. So that's a serious issue. But the more serious issue with this cockpit, I'll sit on the bottom of it, is if one takes water from the sea over into the cockpit, it can fill up, and it can fill up all the way to the top of here. Now the only things draining this cockpit are these weeny holes through those little tubes that we looked at, and these drain very slowly indeed, really. And you can see if the cockpit were full to the top, that in fact it's all going to go in the companionway hatch. So this idea, while it might be nice for weekend sailing and sailing around a harbour, out at sea this arrangement is actually extremely dangerous. Having such a volume of water able to be flooding the boat, and also you can imagine the volume of this whole area. You've got, you know what, a couple of cubic meters of water, so you've got 2 tons of water bearing down on the back of the boat. It just does not bear thinking about having the cockpit flooded, and if it's flooded and then gone into the cockpit lockers, you're stuck, right? So I want to change all that, but that's basically all I want to change. I don't believe in the removal of anything, any part of the hull liner and structural grid. As I've said, I believe those to be a combined structural, those are combined structural elements, and they give the boat its strength. But now let's have a look underneath the cockpit and understand what is going on structurally in the boat. Ow, 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 ow. Oof, ow. Right. So, let's have a look here. Oh, my knee. Right. Sensible about this. I'm going to put the camera down there. Look, right, so this is from inside the boat. This is the side of the cockpit And this is the step. And you'll see actually that effort has been made, that none of the forward part of the cockpit or the step or and above it the seats and the coamings and the side decks are unsupported. So there's no joint between any of this part of the boat and the whole line and structural grid, and I believe this to be so that the boat can be allowed then to flex, so that it's not things can take a greater degree of force if they can bend a little bit, and if they're very, very stiff they tend to snap. So this is part of the bounciness of the boat. And if we look back, we can see where the bounciness ends, and so we have the bulkhead, which is inside the cockpit locker, and underneath that, and we're going to have to pop around the front for that. Underneath that, then you'll see past the cockpit drains, and there's actually a part of glass fibre there that is making a kind of a, it makes a kind of a box under the back edge of the cockpit that supports the floor. But all of the front edge is unsupported to the hull of the boat. It's all part of the deck. So, if we go back and just refer what we've looked at inside to the outside. So this is the back of the, this is the other side of the bulkhead that we were looking at, and then there's a glass fibre between the bulkheads here, and then so there's a glass fibre box here, and we can see that glass fibre box, we're going to go in the locker. So that glass fibre box lines the hull of the boat and joins the box and the cockpit together here, and then runs all the way around the back, around the transom, and supports then the rear of the boat, so that the deck above the transom is linked through the coaming and the back of the cockpit down to this box at the bottom. So we have a structural link between the hull of the boat and the deck of the transom here. Elsewhere we have a structural link between the bulkhead, which is on both sides, and the coaming and seat. But everything forward of this and all of that is all part of the deck and is unsupported to the hull of the boat. That's how she's built. What I want to do, I can see this is already a very long film, so thank you for being with me if you're still here. And we'll just finish off without discussing what we're going to do with the boat ultimately. Let's just have a look at what we've got on the transom, and it is the rudder. Now, in the birthday film, the things I bought Arwyn for her birthday were a steering wheel and an anchor, and those are thoughtful gifts because as long as you're afloat and you can control your direction with the rudder, or you can arrest your being blown onto a shore with an anchor, you're safe. If you lose your rudder, you're just being blown about at sea and you have no control, you have no way of managing your course. It is the principal reason why yachts sometimes get into difficulties and people have to be rescued, is a failure of the steering gear. So this is Arwyn's rudder. It's a very sort of dinghy-like rudder. So you have the rudder stock and then the actual rudder operating part beneath the waterline. And you see it's quite small, it's quite eroded, and it just sticks out underneath the line of the boat. So anything under the water, any log or rope or anything that is going to come through the boat and get caught on the boat, or if it's a heavy object, will actually hit the rudder. And we can see the way the rudder is fixed onto the transom here. The transom is just with a couple of these things, can't remember the name, pintles and something else. But if something hits this, then a lever is created between this point and this point, such as there's a huge concentration of force at the lower rudder mounting point. Now this can then, if you hit something very hard at speed, this can rip out of the bottom of the boat, of the back of the boat, and you can see where we are with the waterline. The waterline is just about here. So if you've got a gash hole in your transom there, that's a big problem. So I'm going to be looking again at the way that the rudder is on Arwyn, and looking at the way that the cockpit is on Arwyn. And also, as we've already looked at, is think about how the rudder, no, how the anchor works, because the anchor is the other piece of critical safety equipment that must be working and must be understood and must be really fully fixed, and in a way that it can be operated at speed in an emergency. By perhaps this anchor winch that we've seen from below, but that remains to be determined. So there we are, that's Arwyn. These rails I don't think are original. It may well be a pulpit at the front and a push pit at the back, and the push pit at the back is some gash nonsense on bits of putty. These are not original, I don't think. It's just something that's been added on. These will be coming off. And then, okay, the last couple of looks then is where an outboard motor would fix. There. And then each of the rigging points here are fixed through chain plates. These are that fix the rigging to the mast. We may not be using traditional rigging on this boat. And you can see these are the rigging points as we saw from the inside. Well, I hope that really is everything. You can see it's a beautiful day. I'm very keen to get on now and get this project started. So the first job is to complete this survey by lifting off the paint and understanding what's underneath and understanding the condition of the boat, what repairs we need to make before we can start then converting her into a houseboat.